we supposed to be doing as Christians? You ever asked yourself that question? It's like, I'm a believer. What am I supposed to do now? Well, there may be lots of specific things that God will call you to do, but the way you get there is let Christ be formed within you. That's really the bottom line. The very simple way of thinking about what we're supposed to do in this Christian life is yield to the influence of God in our hearts, keep ourselves, our hearts and our minds focused on Him in faith toward Him, and allow Him to transform us and build His purposes and intents into our lives as we follow Him. But sometimes that's not so easy. Sometimes we don't have a real practical way of letting ourselves be influenced by His Spirit which we can't see. Although it's ever present, His Spirit is one with our spirit. He lives within us. His grace is constantly being supplied to our hearts. Our hearts are where we believe. And if we turn inwardly to His influence, we will follow Him. But it's difficult sometimes to be led by a spirit that you can't see. So I have a silly little exercise. Now, don't get religious on me over this, but let me read a passage to you. I want to read Colossians 3, 1 through 3 out of the New Living Translation, and then I want to show you a little exercise. Since you have been raised to new life with Christ, set your sights. In other words, look. Try to perceive. Another translation says set your affections or set your mind on things above. But this version says set your sights on the realities of heaven, where Christ sits in the place of honor or authority at God's right hand. Think about the things of heaven, not the things of earth. For you died to this life, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. Now he goes on to address physical behaviors, and he addresses that we are to put on the new man, that we are to put off the old man, the old way of thinking, the old way of self-effort in trying to follow God. But to the way that he frames it, to do that, to put on the new man, to live under God's influence and display the kind of fruit that only God can birth through you that you can't do in your self-effort, is to look into heaven, to specifically look at that throne where Christ is seated at the right hand of God, which, by the way, you are with Him in God. So, I'm not talking about trying to get a vision where the ceiling splits back and you hear thunder pealing into the room and it's like the wind blows your hair and all this kind of stuff, and you're trying to have a charismatic, phenomenal, open vision or whatever. What I'm more talking about is what it represents. So try this with me real fast. I would put a picture up, but I want you to use your imagination. At the time that I'm shooting this, it's right before Christmas. Like I said, don't get religious on me here, but imagine Santa Claus. What images come to your mind? Now, you can either look around your room. In fact, try to do this. Look around if there's a chair next to you or wherever you are, or even on screen here. Try to imagine what Santa Claus looks like. What does his hat look like? What do his clothes look like? What does his belly look like? What color is his belt? What do you notice about the belt? What about his boots? Now, what does he sound like? What's in his hands? So you didn't even know he had anything in his hands, did you? You weren't even looking at his hands until I made the suggestion, and then you can see, oh, there's something in his hand. You know, I don't know. It might be a reindeer rein or a present or something like that. Now think about this. What does Santa Claus represent? Not just what does he look like, but what does he represent? What do you think of? What are the feelings that come into play when you think of Santa Claus? Some of you are thinking gifts. Some of you are thinking a pagan, perverted image of Jesus and that has wrecked the true meaning of Christmas. Whatever it means to you, it doesn't really matter to me. It's not my point. The point is, could you go through the exercise of seeing him and then an emotion or a feeling of what he represents to you come to you? See, this says set your sights or your affections or your mind on things above. That place where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Why would you do that? Not so that you can have a vision, but more so to get the impact of what it represents for him to be seated at the right hand of God. See, he frames doing this exercise of perceiving Christ seated at the right hand of God. That should affect your behaviors, and your role in that is to put on the new man. So what you do is you perceive, whether you're visual or not, you get the understanding of what it represents, what it means to you personally to see or perceive or become aware of Christ seated at the right hand of God. Because what that means when you think about yourself to put on the new man is that you were raised with him to that place. When you believed, doesn't mean you were resurrected with him. The resurrection hasn't happened yet. It means you were elevated to the same place of authority in Christ, with Christ in God. So you go through this process. You're dealing with life. It talks about, don't think about the things of the earth, think about the things of heaven. Practically what that looks like is you're stuck in a dead-end job. You might even hate your job. You're thinking, I'm never going to amount to anything. I'm never going to make more money than the hours that I can put in. That's the way of the earth. You can think, you know what? All things are possible to God. And that's just that's just using money. That's just a basic practical way. You can think about joy. Maybe you're dealing with depression. You have these emotions and these feelings that you just can't seem to get out from under. It feels like there's a dark cloud on top of you. Well, the joy of the Lord is your strength. Can you see joy in Christ in that place of authority? Can you see him being incredibly joyful as he is in communion with his Father and experiencing his place in heaven in relationship with you? See, where do you fit in to Christ's authority? Then you start thinking about that you're a joint heir with him. I mean, he gives you his name. He gives you his authority. He gives you his power. He gives you his spirit, the very essence of life that is flowing through him. His spirit is in you. He who has the Son has the life. And then you think, he's delivered me from the power of darkness and translated me into the kingdom of his dear Son. Then you think about, I am set free from sin and death. I am in the law of life, or the law of liberty, the law of sin and death. I'm free from. There is no condemnation coming toward me from God because I'm in Christ. See, this is what you do. You remind yourself of who Jesus is. You affirm that you are with him in God, and you perceive who he is, the majesty of the kind of being that Jesus is. Just take some time to think about that, because it says in Colossians, it continues, it will affect your behaviors. You've got a repetitive sin issue that you're dealing with. Acknowledge the victory of Christ. Look at Christ in that heavenly place. Notice if he's struggling with sin or not. I'm not trying to say try to have a vision, but perceive his character and realize that you are with him in God. And as you meditate on that, as you can perceive that element of the Spirit of God within you, you give place to it in your heart. You can see it. You can begin to see that it can be for you as well, and you can experience it. And you can then let God influence you in that area, and you leave striving behind of self-effort and trying to please God with your efforts and your works, and you realize, oh my goodness, because of Christ is who he is, I can become like him because I am predestined to be conformed to his image. It is him that does that kind of work as I put my faith in who he is. Your faith becomes great the more confident you are in who he is. So maybe that visual little exercise helped you. Maybe it was a distraction for you, but the point is, you look to Jesus, affirm who he is within you, and let him affect those other areas of your heart that you're trying to change your life. Make it practical and watch yourself reflect the glory of God in this earth. Be sure to subscribe to our channel below so you don't miss any of our videos. There's also a free gift for you in the description, as well as a link to our church and a link to my personal website with my blog, lots of free messages, great articles. I pray those inspire you to trust God and root you deeper in your identity in Christ. God bless you.